The Silence of the Crown. A Bumpy Johnson narrative, a single metallic click echoed against the brick of 125th Street. The man in the driver's seat didn't look back for orders. He knew the cost of disrespecting the King of Harlem. Chapter 1. The Weight of the Crown. Harlem doesn't wake up. It exhales. The morning air over Lenox Avenue is thick, tasting of exhaust, fried dough, and the heavy invisible pressure of a kingdom in balance. It's 1960. The sun is fighting its way through the smog, catching the chrome of a parked Cadillac Fleetwood. It sits low, heavy, like a predator resting in tall grass. In the back seat there is a silhouette. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson doesn't lean back. He sits upright. His spine is a straight line, a structural necessity for a man holding up the ceiling of an entire neighborhood. He wears a suit that costs more than the storefronts he's passing, but the fabric isn't for show. It's armor, it's a message. It says that in a world of chaos, there is still such a thing as order. Outside the glass, the sidewalk is a theater. The numbers runners, the shopkeepers, the mothers pulling children toward the subway, they all feel the car. They don't look directly at it. You don't stare at the sun, and you don't stare at the man who keeps the lights on. They simply adjust their pace. They straighten their ties. They lower their voices. That is the weight. Bumpy watches a young man on the corner. The boy is agitated, hands darting in and out of his pockets, eyes shifting like a cornered rat. He's a small gear in a massive machine, but he's grinding. He's out of sync. Bumpy notes the name in his head. He doesn't need to bark an order. He doesn't need to point. He just watches. To the world, Bumpy is a ghost story told in jazz clubs. To Harlem, he is the floorboards. He's the reason the walls stay upright when the wind from downtown tries to blow them over. But power is a living thing. It requires feeding. It requires the constant, exhausting maintenance of a reputation that must be more terrifying than the law. The law can be bought. The law can be avoided. But you cannot avoid the man who knows the rhythm of your own heartbeat better than you do. The driver, a shadow behind the wheel, keeps his eyes on the rearview mirror. He isn't looking for traffic. He's looking for the shift in Bumpy's expression. That infinitesimal narrowing of the eyes that signals the atmosphere has changed. The silence in the car is absolute. It's the kind of silence that precedes a storm or a funeral. It's the sound of a man who has already decided the future, waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. Bumpy shifts his weight. A gold ring catches a stray beam of light. The crown is heavy, yes. But Bumpy Johnson never had a problem with the weight. He had a problem with those who thought they could carry it better. Chapter 2. The Unspoken Insult. The air inside the Cadillac changes the moment the door opens. It's a man named Richie the Mouth Verna. He's a product of the downtown docks, a man who thinks volume is a substitute for value. He slides into the leather seat beside Bumpy, bringing with him the smell of cheap gin and the frantic, sweaty energy of someone who hasn't slept in 48 hours. Richie doesn't wait for Bumpy to speak. That's his first mistake. "We got a problem, Bumpy," Richie says, his voice bouncing off the high-end upholstery like a pinball. "The Italians are restless. They're saying the percentages in the 25th precinct are leaning too far north. They're saying you're getting comfortable. They sent me to tell you the arrangement is evolving." Bumpy doesn't turn his head. He continues to look out the window at a woman sweeping the front step of her brownstone. To Bumpy, that woman is more important than the man sitting 3 inches away. She is part of the foundation. Richie is just dust. "Evolving," Bumpy repeats. The word is soft, almost academic. He tastes it, finds it lacking. "Yeah," Richie says, emboldened by the lack of a shout. He mistakes Bumpy's silence for hesitation. "They want a bigger cut of the numbers, and they want it by Friday. No more handshakes, no more gentlemen's agreements. They want it in writing, or they start moving their own people into the clubs. You understand what I'm telling you?" Richie leans in closer. He reaches out a hand, perhaps intending to pat Bumpy's shoulder in a show of false camaraderie. The driver's eyes flash in the rearview mirror. It's the only movement in the front of the car. Before Richie's hand can make contact, Bumpy speaks. "You're breathing my air, Richie." It isn't a threat. It's an observation. The tone is the same one a man might use to tell a waiter his soup is cold. But the effect is instantaneous. Richie's hand freezes in midair. The cabin of the Cadillac suddenly feels very small. The oxygen seems to thin out, leaving Richie gasping for a breath he can't quite catch. "I don't think you heard me," Richie stammers, his bravado leaking out through the cracks in his voice. "I'm representing the family. I'm the messenger." Bumpy finally turns his head, slowly. It's a mechanical movement, precise and terrifying. He looks at Richie not as a man, but as an obstacle, a smudge on a clean lens. "A messenger is a tongue," Bumpy says quietly, "and a tongue is only useful as long as it's attached to a brain that knows when to stop moving it. You've come into my house, in my neighborhood, and you've forgotten the most basic rule of the street." Richie swallows hard. He looks toward the driver, seeking some kind of humanity, but he finds only a stone-faced silhouette. "What rule?" Richie whispers. "You don't talk to a king like he's a debtor," Bumpy says, "and you never, under any circumstances, raise your voice in this car." The silence returns, but it's heavier now. It's a physical weight pressing down on Richie's chest. He realizes far too late that he hasn't just delivered a message. He's signed a receipt. Bumpy looks back out the window. The woman is finished sweeping. She looks up, sees the Cadillac, and gives a small, respectful nod. Bumpy acknowledges her with a flick of his eyes. "Get out," Bumpy says. "But the answer? What do I tell them?" Bumpy doesn't answer. He doesn't have to. The driver is already leaning back, his hand hovering near the door handle, his expression as cold as a winter morning in the Atlantic. Richie stumbles out of the car, his legs feeling like water. He stands on the curb, adjusted his jacket, trying to reclaim some shred of the tough guy persona he brought with him. He watches the Cadillac pull away, silent and smooth. He thinks he survived the meeting. He thinks he won because he got the last word in. He is wrong. Chapter 3. The Protocol of the Street. The Cadillac pulls away from the curb, a silent black ghost cutting through the morning haze of 125th Street. Inside, the atmosphere has returned to its natural state, heavy, cool, and absolute. Bumpy looks at the back of his driver's head. The man's name is whispered in the alleyways as a warning, but in this car, he is simply the extension of Bumpy's will. He drives with one hand on the wheel and the other resting near his thigh, a posture of relaxed lethality. "He was loud," the driver says. It's the first time he's spoken in an hour. His voice is a low gravel, barely rising above the hum of the engine. "Loud men are usually trying to convince themselves they exist," Bumpy responds. He reaches into his breast pocket and pulls out a silver cigar case. But Richie isn't the problem. Richie is a symptom. The people downtown, they're testing the temperature. They want to see if the sun still rises in Harlem because I say it does, or because they allow it. Bumpy clips the end of the cigar with surgical precision. "The protocol is simple," Bumpy continues, his voice steady as a heartbeat. "When someone enters your home and spits on the floor, you don't argue about the mess. You remove the source. If you let one drop of disrespect settle into the carpet, the whole house starts to rot. The neighbors smell it, the enemies see it, and soon the walls come down." He lights a cigar, the blue smoke curling toward the roof. Through the window, Harlem is waking up in earnest now. These people don't know about Richie. They don't have to know. That is Bumpy's gift to them. He carries the violence so they can carry their groceries. He manages the darkness so they can walk in the light. "Junie," Bumpy says softly. The driver's eyes meet Bumpy's in the mirror. There is no hesitation there, no fear, only a profound, terrifying readiness. "Sir?" Richie thinks he's going home to a hot meal and a pat on the back from his bosses. He thinks he's a big man because he sat in this seat and walked away. He's currently feeling 10 feet tall. Bumpy takes a long, slow draw from the cigar. He exhales a cloud that obscures the rearview mirror for a fleeting second. "I want you to remind him how small he actually is. Not for the sake of the noise, but for the sake of the silence. We need it to be quiet again, Junie. Very quiet." The driver nods once. It's a pact. It's a signature on a death warrant that hasn't been printed yet. The driver knows the protocol. He knows that in Bumpy's world, a mistake isn't a conversation, it's a debt, and the interest is due immediately. Chapter 4. Point Blank Silence. Richie Verna is standing on the corner of 116th waiting for a cab. He's adjusting his tie, a smirk playing on his lips. He's already rehearsing the story he'll tell, how he sat in the lion's den and didn't blink. He feels like a giant. He feels untouchable. Then the black Cadillac Fleetwood rounds the corner. It doesn't screech. It doesn't roar. It glides to a halt 3 feet from where Richie stands, as smooth and inevitable as a funeral procession. The passenger window rolls down halfway. Richie's smirk falters. The giant begins to shrink. Junie, the driver, doesn't get out of the car. He keeps his left hand on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed forward, watching the red light at the end of the block. To any passerby, it looks like a simple conversation between friends. "Hey," Richie says, his voice hitting a higher pitch than he intended. "I thought we were done." Junie turns his head. His expression is a void. He reaches across the empty passenger seat. In his hand is a .38 snub nose. It looks small, almost toy-like, against the vast backdrop of the Cadillac's interior. "Bumpy wanted me to give you something," Junie says. Richie's eyes go wide. He tries to speak, to offer a deal, a plea, anything to fill the space where his life used to be. But the words die in his throat. He realizes now that when you pull a tiger's tail, you don't get to negotiate with the teeth. Junie leans out slightly. The barrel of the gun is inches from Richie's chest. There is a moment of absolute crystalline stillness. The city around them seems to hold its breath. Click. The hammer falls. The sound isn't the deafening roar of a cannon. It's a sharp, dry crack that cuts through the humidity. It's a punctuating mark at the end of a very long sentence. Richie doesn't fly backward. He simply collapses inward, his legs folding like a card table. He hits the pavement with a dull thud. Junie doesn't wait to watch the blood pool. He pulls his hand back inside the car. He rolls the window up. The glass is tinted, sealing the silence back inside the cabin. He looks at the traffic light. It turns green. He taps the accelerator. The Cadillac moves forward, passing over the spot where Richie's shadow once stood. In the back seat, Bumpy Johnson hasn't moved. He hasn't looked out the window. He is occupied with the ash on the end of his cigar, tapping it gently into the crystal tray. "Drive," Bumpy says. Chapter 5. The Ripple Effect. The Cadillac doesn't speed away. To speed would be an admission of guilt, or worse, fear. Junie keeps the car at a steady, rhythmic 20 miles per hour. Behind the tinted glass, Bumpy Johnson remains a statue of tailored wool and cool resolve. He knows that in Harlem, the ground has a way of swallowing what no longer belongs. Outside, the neighborhood reacts, but not with the chaotic screaming of the downtown streets. This is Harlem. A barber standing in the doorway of his shop holds his shears midair. He saw the flash. He heard the crack. He steps back inside and pulls the shade halfway down. It isn't a gesture of cowardice. It's a gesture of witness. He has seen the king's justice. The street is a living thing, and right now its pulse is steadying. "They're watching, Junie," Bumpy says. "They are, sir," Junie replies. "Good. They need to see that the floor is still solid. They need to know that when an outsider comes into this house and tries to move the furniture, we don't call a committee. We don't ask for permission. We simply correct the error. This is the community layer. To the police downtown, this is a homicide. To the people on the sidewalk, this is a restoration of the peace." Richie Verna wasn't just a threat to Bumpy. He was a threat to the ecosystem. By removing him, Bumpy hasn't just protected his interest. He's protected the neighborhood's sovereignty. A group of young men on the corner stop their dice game as the Fleetwood passes. They stand up straight. One of them touches the brim of his hat. It is a salute to the man who ensures that when the sun goes down, the wolves stay in their own woods. Bumpy watches the boy in the side mirror. "Respect," Bumpy muses, "is a currency that loses its value if you don't spend it. Today, we spent a little to make sure the rest of our gold stays safe in the vault. Chapter 6. The Architect of Order. The Cadillac comes to a final, graceful halt in front of the Casper Holstein building. Junie puts the car in park. He doesn't reach for the door. He waits. Bumpy remains in the back seat for a long moment, watching the street through the veil of his own cigar smoke. To those who know the language of Harlem, he is an architect surveying his masterpiece. Every brick in this neighborhood is a part of a larger blueprint he has spent decades drawing in ink and blood. History is a loud room, Junie, Bumpy says. His voice is smooth as the silk lining of his coat. Everyone is shouting, trying to be heard above the noise of the next man. They think the one who screams the loudest is the one who leads. But they're wrong. It's the silence that people remember. He looks at the back of Junie's head, the man who just ended a life with clinical detachment. That sound on 116th Street, it wasn't just a bullet. It was a period at the end of a very long sentence. It was the sound of a border being drawn. It was the sound of Harlem being told it's safe for another night. Bumpy Johnson didn't rule through the constant application of terror. He ruled through the possibility of it, a shadow so dark and so perfectly placed that no one dared to step into it. The evolving arrangement with the downtown families died with Richie Verna. The message will reach the high-rises by midnight. The king isn't interested in negotiations. The king is interested in the peace. Bumpy finally opens the door. He steps out onto the sidewalk, his polished shoes meeting the concrete with a firm, rhythmic click. He pauses, looking up at the sky. He is in the center of a world he built. Junie watches him in the mirror until Bumpy disappears into the shadows of the building. Only then does the driver allow himself a single, shallow breath. He looks at his right hand, the hand that held the .38. It is perfectly steady. He knows he didn't just pull a trigger, he helped hold up the sky. The blood on 116th Street will be washed away by the morning rain, but the memory of that single point-blank crack will remain. It will settle into the marrow of the neighborhood. It will become part of the legend, passed down in whispers from one generation to the next. The story of the day, the sound of a driver's gun, changed the course of history. Harlem is quiet now, the way it's supposed to be. Bumpy Johnson is home.